Hi, I'm Jack Reiner, the managing partner at the Graydon firm in Cincinnati. 2021 marks the 150th anniversary of Graydon. And while we're enormously proud to be celebrating that milestone, we recognize that the reason we continue to exist is our client. They're the reason we're here, and they're the reason we're able to give back to our community in the many ways that we do. So to celebrate our sesquicentennial, we've decided not to shine a spotlight on us, but rather shine that light on some of the clients we serve who are truly iconic parts of our community. We've launched a series of iconic conversations with these clients, and we're delighted to have this opportunity. And today, I'm joined by Burl Love, who is the editor at the Cincinnati Enquirer, truly an iconic part of our community. And we're looking forward to a conversation about the Enquirer and Burl. Burl, welcome. Thank you for joining us.
Well, thank you.
Did I get the title right? I'm sorry. I may have botched that a little bit.
I mean, my business card says editor and vice president of news, but that's a little bit redundant. I'm the editor of the Enquirer. That's good enough.
Well, I don't want to leave out the vice president part. That's kind of important. You know, that's pretty critical. Hey, so tell us a little bit, Burl, about the history of the Enquirer. I think actually in our community, and I think actually you all are a little older than Graydon, I think, aren't you?
We are 180 years this April, I believe. Yeah.
You're way older. You're way older than Graydon.
Right. Yeah, the Enquirer, if you think about it, has been around since before the Civil War. A lot of people don't realize that back then there were half a dozen daily newspapers in the city of Cincinnati, and it's kind of funny, since the Cincinnati Enquirer, when it started, it was the known as the Democratic Party newspaper, going up against three other newspapers that were aligned with the Whig Party. So, I mean, getting into some history there, as long as the Enquirer has been around, yeah.
Yeah, that's kind of amazing. And yeah, I think that people lose sight a little bit about just the number of newspapers that a city like Cincinnati had at any one given time, and how, politically aligned they tended to be. And, I think about, to a certain extent, everything comes back around, right? But I think about the cable channels and people talking about, Fox is over on the right and MSNBC is over on the left. And, that probably, in some respects, harkens back to what it was like 180 years ago.
There are still newspapers in our own company. That you have the Tallahassee Democrat, the Arizona Republic in Phoenix, what used to be the Arizona Republican. And they all harken back to when a local business person, a millionaire back in the day, would also own a newspaper and be able to use the editorial pages to advance his political agenda. And so that was very, very common until we got into, corporate ownership and the modern era of newspapering. But back in the late 1800s, early 1900s, they were very closely aligned with whatever party they were affiliated with, unabashedly.
Yeah. Well, it's just interesting to me, the fragmentation, and I know we read about things like, was it McCormick that owned the Chicago Tribune that just hated Roosevelt, Franklin Roosevelt. And,
Exactly, yeah. And our own history, it started as a paper aligned with the Democratic Party, but the history of the Enquirer with different owners and such, there was a time when it was owned by Carl Lindner Jr., the father of Carl Lindner III. And at that point, the newspaper definitely took a, lean towards the right, and then, and I think still today people, when I get emails from readers who are angry about our coverage and accusing us of being, slanted one way or the other, I get it from both sides. So that's kind of tells me that we're, if we're making both sides upset, we're probably doing our job correctly. But there's a lot of, the weight of the Lindner ownership as far as aligning the paper to the right is still prevalent. People still feel that way, even though they sold it, I think, in the 70s to the company that would eventually merge with Gannett, our current ownership. So, long memories here for people and assumptions that stick. Yeah.
It is very true. It is very true. What do you see as the mission of the Enquirer? At this point in time.
I think our mission can be stated pretty simply that we exist to inform and empower the community, and that ties directly, I think, to something I am very proud of, and that's our role in sustaining and preserving our democracy. That to inform and empower the community, you have to have an informed citizenry if you're going to have a successful democracy. And even though we position ourselves as a business, the greater cause of empowering the community through news and information is something that's protected by the First Amendment of the Constitution. So there's that piece of it. I think I would say that it all boils down to that being our mission. That without an informed public, our democracy is not going to be sustained.
Yeah. Well, I can speak to that. I mean, I know the number of cases that I and our firm have done for the Enquirer that are just purely to obtain public records or to protect a First Amendment interest, and it is not, it's not a profit-making endeavor for the paper, which is admirable. And some newspapers, some media organizations have kind of pulled back from those fights, and to the Enquirer's credit, you all haven't, and I thank you for that. I very much appreciate it as a member of the public and as your lawyer.
People are often look critical at the corporate ownership of journalism, of newspapers, of media organizations. I feel fortunate, and the reason I've been with our parent company so long, Gannett, is they have always supported any newsroom's effort to keep government transparent, go after open records. You're familiar with Barbara Wall, who used to be corporate counsel for Gannett prior to the merger. Just a refreshing approach to her job was, we're here not to tell you not to publish something. We're here to help you get something published without being sued. But we always, exactly. We're not here to say no, because, the work we do, although we're not always admired by the political leaders, the ones I respect understand our role, that, we have, the laws that speak to things like open meetings and open records. They're important. They are public servants, and if the public is not able to inspect their work, for lack of a better term, then we slowly see our democracy slip away from us. So it sounds very grand to talk about it in those terms, especially when we are in an era where I think people are trying to wrap their minds around what is the role of the press.
Right.
But and as you know, because we keep you very busy, there are always cases where we are having to, request records multiple times, cite law, go up against broad interpretations of what information is privileged and what isn't. And it's all, it all boils down to the right for the public to know what their leaders are doing, how their taxes are being spent, how decisions get made. The most recent, I think big high profile story that had to do with a government, government leaders, elected leaders conducting business outside of the public view was the infamous, Gang of Five text messaging scandal, which is still working its way almost right now. So, it's always going to be with us, and so without an active press or news organization in town to to champion this, I shudder to think of how things would be.
Yeah, there's no question. I at one point in this conversation referred to the Enquirer as a newspaper. I'm not sure that's totally accurate, is it? These days?
So that's a great question because, we are a multi-platform digital news operation right now that still publishes a, newspaper 7 days a week. But that is no longer the primary way that we deliver news and information to our audience. Our digital audience, especially with massive adoption of smartphones, is digital right now. But we still have a print edition of what we do, the newspaper. And while some, like I consider myself a digital news executive, and while some in my cohort want to steer away from the term newspaper, I still think it's a cool thing, the paper, right? That I think people are sophisticated enough to know that when we say, oh, that was in the paper, that's, most people have read that online and not, on a paper that they're holding in their hands. So I'm not one of those people who am adamant about not calling it a newspaper because people know what that means, and I think that the history of newspapers, especially in America, there's a lot of brand equity in that term. I think it's something to embrace, and maybe we can educate people on how newspapers have evolved. But I don't bristle at that term. I'm still proud to be associated with the paper, and there is still something about the when something appears in the print edition of the newspaper, it just feels official. It feels, like it's real, like it matters, and like we've captured history. The digital news information is so ephemeral. It's just constantly going by us that there's still, when our country elects a president, people want to save that day's edition of the paper to share with their grandkids. I know many people that when their child is born will buy a hard copy of the paper to put it in a box with special things, baby book and the gifts and everything like that. Like, here's what was going on the day you were born. So it's still, I think we'd be foolish, those of people in my role, not to embrace that history and then leverage that, because it's still, I think it's still a cool thing when you see your name in the paper most times.
Yeah, well, the other thing I would say is, we don't want people to think too limited, because obviously I'm thinking not only the digital presence, but the Enquirer has done some really great podcasting over the last couple of years. The Accused podcast, all 3 seasons of that was just fantastic, and I've become a real fan lately of the That Says Cincinnati podcast with Jason Williams and Sherry Coolidge. It's just fun. It's just informative and fun to listen to. So, I do appreciate that. You're looking for alternate avenues to get information out, which is really fantastic. And like I say, I don't think I'm alone in this, but the pandemic has changed patterns. And one of mine was, instead of going to the gym and watching the cable news in the morning, I now go on long walks and listen to my podcast. So and I feel like my blood pressure doesn't rise quite as much as it used to when I was watching the cable news. It's probably healthy. But about the pandemic, how has it affected what you're doing and what your organization's doing?
I mean, it affected us in that we don't operate out of the newsroom anymore. Like many companies, we have had to adapt to Zoom or Microsoft Teams, and operate that way. But as far as the process of news gathering, I mean, even in the early pandemic, when people were sanitizing their groceries when they brought them home, and we were just not sure of how pervasive the virus would be. We were deemed essential workers, and our reporters and photographers were out, still doing their job and covering the news, at 6 feet, hopefully, and with masks. And then, during the pandemic, we also had one of the most significant moments of reckoning in our country when it comes to, police violence against African American in our nation, and the George Floyd killing rang true here because of our history. And we're coming up on the 20th anniversary of the 2001 riots, so we were out, among the protesters, documenting this incredible time and place, we find ourselves in right now. And as we even had a reporter find himself on the wrong side of the police line and temporarily restrained and detained by the police just because he was trying to document dealing with protesters. So, we've been out there. So in many ways, our job hasn't changed at all. We're still out there, our reporters, our photographers, gathering the news.
Yeah, the news goes on. I guess I do know it's a little bit of a challenge when sports kind of shut down, but I thought that, I thought there was a creative, it's just the look backs and special features that you did to kind of keep us engaged with the sports page. Because,
Right.
I certainly missed the Reds until they started playing again.
Yeah, I mean, and, you bring up these things, we, telling the story of how our lives changed and what it revealed about us was one of the big projects we did at the end of last year. And you talk about, telling stories in different ways, not being limited to, the two-dimensional ink on print. The centerpiece of that story, of that project, was a 45-minute documentary that accompanied the more traditional report. That's was super compelling to watch. There was a moment there that I won't forget, where Jeff Ruby is on camera with his daughter, who's basically running his operations right now, and he and Brittany are talking about, this is the first time in as long as he's been in restaurants that they have had to lay off employees. And Jeff Ruby, who is known to be, let's say, not a softie, not a sentimental guy, but kind of a boisterous character, always with a quip or a one-liner and just a bigger-than-life persona, broke down in tears. Had this very human moment between a father and a daughter who are in business together, and how the pandemic affected them. And so, I think it points to that during times like these is when journalism matters the most. When people are trying to sort out what's happening to them, whether it's something very practical like when can I get my vaccine, or something a little more reflective of what just happened this past year, and where are we as a community, where are we as a country, putting context and meaning around that and helping people sort that out. That's her job. That's what many of us answered the call to do. So yeah, it has been challenging. I mean, on the business side, a lot of our advertising is tied to events and people going to Reds games and people going to concerts, and all of those things that shut down put a stress on the business side of our operation. But on the audience side, the readership side, we probably had one of our biggest years ever as far as the number of people that we reached and the number of the pieces of content, the articles that people actually spent time with. It was one of our biggest years ever as far as audience.
That's great. So what do you think the future holds, looking out?
I think when people ask that, they're assuming that there's going to be one kind of thing. Like 10 years ago, we were wondering if our business would convert to micropayments. We were wondering if the shift away from desktop web to smartphone was going to be the way, the answer. And what I've come to realize is that the technology is changing so rapidly that there's probably going to be several different things. I mean, one thing that's certain is back in the glory days of newspapering, it was purely on the back of advertising, print advertising, and that's gone and is never coming back the way it was. The advertising is very different in the digital arena. So that's going to be a small piece of it. But what we are shifting to very rapidly is to be a business built on subscriptions. And people tell me, well, you were always kind of built on subscriptions. I mean, people had to subscribe to receive the print edition. But the truth is that was a loss leader. The cost to print a newspaper, the paper, the press, the ink, to load it on the trucks, to buy the gas, to get it, to distribution centers, to get it, into the hands of the carriers, which, by the way, there's a lot of people that write about Amazon and how they've, they are cracking the code to the quote unquote last mile, to get things delivered, consumer goods delivered, whether it be groceries or books or whatever. Those of us in the newspaper industry know that we've been doing that last mile, for more than 100 years,
yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So the cost to bring someone a print edition of the newspaper to the porch every day, whatever we historically charged for that didn't come close to covering the costs. So it was just completely built on the print advertising. But now, we are rapidly growing digital subscriptions. So that's a huge piece of what I think the future looks like for us. One of my roles, I think, is when I get the opportunity to talk to groups is to remind people of the value of news. And I think you've seen this little shtick I have where I if I'm doing a PowerPoint, I have a cup of Starbucks coffee, and I say, so if you have a daily coffee habit, what are you willing to pay for that cup of coffee? And well, maybe you're not even going to Starbucks. Maybe you're going to McDonald's. So I flash a picture of McCafe. It's like $1.99 or 99 cents. And if you have a full access digital subscription to the Enquirer, depending on whatever rate you're paying, and whether it's an introductory rate or a flat rate, it's half the, at worst, at most, half the price of a cup of coffee a day. So if you're willing to pay that for coffee, are you willing to support local journalism in your community that does all the things we talked about earlier? Are you willing to make that investment? Are you willing to support the work of people who, like you, live in this community, call it home, want to make a difference, and want to provide this service? And people understand that, when they take the time to think about that, they understand that what we do comes at a cost. And even though in their minds, and much of that is self-inflicted on our part, they think, well, it should be free if I'm just going to a website. But there's a cost to produce that journalism. There's a cost to hire our legal counsel, right? There's everything is it's not cheap what we do. So that's a big part of what I do now with the community outreach part of my job is to hopefully persuade people that we're worth half the price of a cup of coffee to support us. And so that's been a huge success for our company and especially in the Cincinnati market is growing our digital subscription base. We're we're just under 30,000 now digital only subscribers on top of our more traditional subscribers. And we've got aggressive goals to grow that. And then, the other thing that's happening is we're starting to see, nonprofit journalism organizations pop up to help us cover the gaps. So we currently right now are called Report for America that seeks to, one, employ journalists, and two, help fill in the gaps where we have some news deserts right now. And a great example is, the Enquirer historically has had a big presence in northern Kentucky, and over the years that had been scaled back due to economics and other factors. And so now, working with Report for America, we've added a journalist fully devoted to the communities in northern Kentucky. So we're starting to see that as well, that where different models of journalism are popping up, nonprofit models, foundation-supported models, and things like that can't exist in a vacuum. You just can't send a reporter out there who doesn't have a platform to deliver the news on. So these kind of, legacy media companies work with is, I think, part of it too. So all these puzzle pieces, I think, are going to fit together, and we'll see a clear picture of what does the newspaper, what does journalism look like moving forward.
Yeah, so if somebody wants to subscribe, what's the best way? Do they go to Cincinnati.com, or how would you direct them?
Way, right on top of the website at Cincinnati.com, upper right-hand corner, it says subscribe, and you hit on that, and you will see whatever deal we have going. We have a President's Day sale coming up because who doesn't like a good President's Day sale? And whether you want to get a digital-only subscription or you want to get some frequency of print, we have all these options still. And as Cincinnati is a very established city community that is charmingly, I think, anchored to its past and its traditions, whether that be the Reds, opening day parade, the ballet, or whatever it is. We really care about our history here, and it makes a great market. It makes a great place to do journalism. And we still have a healthy print audience as well, that we want to maintain and still keep that 7-day. If you have a 7-day print habit, we want to keep that as an option for you. So, and that that's the challenge, because we are evolving quickly into a digital news company business that is still tied to and happily tied to a technology that's been around for a couple hundred years now or more. So it's a unique challenge. We've got a foot in each track right now.
You sure do. Hey, so Burl, tell us a little bit about your own personal journey, how you wound up in the seat that you're in right now.
So that's a good story. I grew up in Cincinnati. I grew up a fan of the Enquirer, and thought it would be, just really cool to work at the Cincinnati Enquirer. So, but I didn't know what I wanted to do. I went to the University of Cincinnati as an engineering student, which firmly established in my mind that was not the path I wanted to be on. So changed majors, was editor of the student newspaper, the News Record at UC. And a little known fact, when I was looking for internships, I actually applied for an internship at the Enquirer, didn't get it, not holding any grudges, but eventually talked myself into a job there at the Enquirer, after working at a couple other places briefly, some smaller newspapers, one in Michigan. Got the chance to work at my hometown newspaper, was thrilled to do that. But then, if your destiny is to be an editor, there's only one of those jobs in any town, right? So I left the Enquirer to be the editor of the Reno Gazette-Journal, still part of the Gannett Company, and then loved it out there, loved the West. But in the back of my mind, thought it would be cool to do what I was doing there in Cincinnati. After that, I went to USA Today as an executive editor and had a ball there. I was, for a time while I was at USA Today, I had responsibility for the Washington bureau, and that was during the 2016 election. So I'll never forget, being in Washington, working with our Washington bureau on, the year that Donald Trump became president, and what a, the lessons learned there, I think, by every journalist, but especially all the journalists working in the bubble of DC about where our country was at that time. I'll never forget that experience. But when the opportunity came, was presented to me to return to Cincinnati to be editor, I didn't give it a second thought. I mean, that's, dream job for me to be the editor of the newspaper in your hometown. So that's
like 3 years ago, and I remember going to lunch with you on your first day, and I think it wasn't the winter, wasn't it? It feels like it was.
Yeah, I started in January. Yeah.
Yeah, I remember that. Yeah. Yeah, that's great. So, and we're glad you're back. You obviously, I see the Lake Tahoe poster, so Nevada is still somewhat on your mind occasionally, right?
Oh yeah.
So, yeah.
It's my
well, what a treat to work for the place you grew up reading, all those years. I want to ask you, I know we're getting a little tight on time, but so you've got somebody coming in from out of town. You want to show them, something about Cincinnati that really will really speak, whether it's a food or an event or a place. What would you make sure that your out of town friend sees here?
Well, I have this person's my boss now, but was coworker at the time. The editor, at the time she was the editor of the Des Moines Register, but she's a Detroit girl, right? She loves her Tigers. And I was trying to explain to her about why, she's like, why would anyone like the Reds? Because at the time, it had been a while since the Reds had done anything. 1990 was a long time ago, even though to me it seems like it was yesterday. What is it? Why do people even care about the Reds anymore? I'm like, you just don't understand. I said, you need to come to Cincinnati on opening day. And so I was able, to get her here with a couple other, journalism friends. So she came for opening day, saw the parade, saw the, masses of people all around the banks and the Holy Grail, and, and just saw what a real baseball town is. No offense to my friends in Detroit, and she got it. So that whole experience, just opening day, the parade. Of course, I had to introduce her to Skyline, even though she's a vegetarian, so that didn't go very well. But I think that there's so much about opening day that captures what Cincinnati's all about, even if you're not into baseball.
Yeah. I don't disagree with you. It's an amazing time, and we at Creighton we typically do an open house, just because our office is right across from Great American, and we missed that last year. I guess we're going to miss it this year too, unfortunately. So, really looking forward to the time when we can all do that and get back together and fully enjoy it. It's good that they'll be playing whenever they start, however long the season's going to be, but. You're right. I think that's an excellent choice, and hopefully it sounds like you converted her just a little bit anyway. So
yeah, she wants to come back.
All right, good deal. Hey, well, Burrell, thank you so much for your time. We appreciate the Enquirer's role in our community and the important work that it does, and we so much appreciate being able to be of service to you. You're a great guy, and the Enquirer is a great client, and we're just really proud that that we can be a part of the mission, and we really thank you for taking the time today and talking to us. So.
Thank you. It was fun.